Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for what is now our second Singa webinar in the UK. The first worked out pretty well, so here we are once again. As per the first, which is very much linked to this one, it should last around about 45 minutes, which we did brilliantly last time. But again, any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll get through them at the end of the session. This time, I'm pleased not to have to remember too many names, but equally pleased and fortunate to welcome Katy Moses to this webinar. Katy is founder of Cam Media, a hospitality consumer insights and trends agency working with 22 of the biggest pub companies in the UK. Katy will give our viewers insights into life post-lockdown and how operators can use competitive socializing to generate much needed extra revenue with practical examples. Hopefully I've introduced you well enough, Katy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, Steve. And yeah, looking forward to going through this. I haven't actually thought about competitive socializing and experiential for a few weeks. So it's been good to get my head back into it and look at how that might look post-lockdown.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us. Where this is your first webinar with us, I'm Steve Dalton, country manager at Singa. I'll be moderating to a degree, asking some of your questions and maybe answering a few depending on our audience's appetite to put me on the spot. But ultimately we're here to hear from Katy and the insights she'll share around competitive socializing. Yeah, once again, thanks to everyone for joining and let's kick things off. I thought it was probably a good idea to start with just a recap of our first webinar, which was on the same topic where we discussed competitive socializing with Amber Taverns, Shuffle and Advocate Pub Group. These were discussions prior to the recent government easing announcements, but we did conclude on a number of things. One, relaunch and review of entertainment with safety and profitability in focus would happen. How big would depend on the easings and what takes place from the first week of July. Secondly, technology was integral in creating competitive socializing and a destination style environment. Amber and Advocate have either deployed or looking to deploy entertainment options that were interactive and helped to engage guests. Social competition would return with a level of pent-up demand. Again, how much is dependent on easing, but it was clear that the one thing that was missed over the last few months was indeed a physical drink with friends and family. And lastly, entertainment options are vast, as I'm guessing we'll see in the slides that follow from Katy. And an in-house solution to a degree did offer some of the participants control of cost and flexibility where the behavior of guests and reopening rules are changing on a daily and monthly basis. So there you have it, an hour's discussion summarized on one slide for everyone. This content is available, so just let us know if you want a copy and we'll be happy to forward on. So technology was mentioned quite a lot. Technology was mentioned not just from Singa's perspective, but technology in general. So things like, how can I use technology to manage guests, order taking, capacity management? How can technology create buzz, social experiences, and possibly drive more people through the door? You know, can entertainment be self-managed, freeing up time for staff to take orders and do their job, not just 60%, but 100% of the time? And we did hear a number of times the subject around mobile first when it comes to entertainment, and that was really clear. So especially when it comes to younger audiences looking for that something different. So the whole growth and demand for Singa from our side has been great to witness, but I'm keen to see today how that may or may not align with market stats that Katy will share on the wider demand for socializing and entertainment in general. And I guess underlying all of what was discussed was the need to understand the customer. And that is really key, their needs and aligning that to what's needed to drive the business. Everyone on last week's webinar said that they had been given the time to evaluate their past business activity and plan for the future. Paul from Advocate Pubs said it's every pub company's duty to be different and think outside the box. So we assumed there were plenty of guests on that webinar in exactly the same position. Research is key, and one thing that helps us to make decisions is the insight, stats, and knowledge gained from agencies like Cam Media. We of course do lots of research, but it's also important to step back and look at the wider changes afoot when it comes to entertainment and socializing as a whole. So Katy, this is the point where I hand over to you and do some listening of my own.
Excellent. Let's see how seamless we can make this.
Pretty good so far.
There we go. Look at that. It's like I've done this before. Thank you so much for having me on, and that's interesting to see your stats there as well, and I might actually put on a couple of those as we go through, Steve. So for those of you who don't know who Cam Media are, we are a research consultancy agency. We work primarily across the grocery industry and hospitality, so we kind of straddle both. We work with operators, so whether that's pubs, bars, restaurants, restaurant groups, pub companies, and then all the grocery side of things, and then also the people that supply into them now, whether that's tech suppliers, whether that is competitive socializing suppliers, whether it's drinks, food, whatever that might be. What I'm going to share with you today is mainly insights that Cam Media has as part of some of the reports that we put out throughout the years. The majority of our work is bespoke, but these reports are available. Give us a shout if you want these slides at the end as well. I did say to Steve I was happy to give them to anyone that's listening, so we can deal with that at the end. So just want to put a bit of context in, and obviously remember that most of this research was done prior lockdown, and I'm going to try and give you some context around that as to how things maybe look differently now and how things might look differently in the future. But what we do know is that pubs were closing at roughly a rate of 3 a day. There are a gazillion different reasons for this. That's the technical term, and I'm going to take you through some of those later on. But essentially, the idea of going out just for a quiet pint and sitting and having a couple of drinks and going home just doesn't appeal to a lot of the UK consumer these days, and I'd like to suggest that going forward and coming out of this lockdown, I think we're going to see that as even more pronounced in consumer behaviour. The fact that people have less disposable income, again, this is all prior to Corona, and therefore if they were going to go out and spend money, then we wanted to do something that was, you know, a bit more of an experience rather than just going out and getting drunk. That doesn't seem to be very popular as well with the younger demographics. So we've also got to try and think about the fact that things like competitive socializing and experiential, that I've always been a big advocate of, these things are helping us to future-proof, because the future pub customer is not the same as the pub customer of yore. So this data I'm going to share with you now is from a research report called On Trade Outlook, where we spoke to 1,000 consumers who go to pubs and bars regularly, and we sort of said to them, you know, what do you want from your pub or bar experience? And you can see there, and it's interesting to have that data split out by demographic. I think that the average rate works out to be about 68% overall, but you can see 73% to the younger age group there. So that encompasses all of Gen Z that are legally allowed to be drinking in pubs, who've said that I want pubs and bars to provide me with an experience I can't get at home. I actually think this is going to become even more important coming out of lockdown, because consumers have got used to creating, you know, entertaining themselves, creating their own entertainment within their homes. So those that do want to come straight back out, or even those that are more cautious about how they come out, but when they do get out, they are going to want something that they can't get at home even more, because it's going to be very much, right, well, I've learned now that I can watch the National Theatre live stream. I can cook myself a Nando's chicken because I've managed to master that recipe. So we need to be thinking about what can't they do at home that will help to sort of bring people back to pubs and bars. And I think that it's really important that we keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, but also just in general when we reopen. I've talked several times about the growth of the experience economy, and I'm a millennial myself, and yes, I can see a couple of you watching that know me very well, Jacqueline and Paul, and I'm only just a millennial, but I am one, I can tell you. we know that nearly 3 in 4 millennials would rather spend money on experience versus material goods. That's not going to change coming out of lockdown. Now, we are going to be more cautious. We're probably going to have less disposable income to spend. We're also going to have a slightly shrunken version of experiences that are available to us, because there are so many areas, especially travel, that are going to open up much more slowly than those of us who are craving experience would like, which actually puts people like, puts operators of pubs, bars, restaurants actually in a really positive place, because they will be able to open up as long as they've got the things in place that they need to in order to do that. We know that expenditure on experiences has grown 4 times faster than expenditure on physical goods. That's a US stat, but I've certainly seen some similar UK ones. And millennials are outspending all others on experiences, but all age groups are spending more on experiences than things. So I think just, again, coming out of lockdown, that won't change. It will just become harder to fulfill that need. But as operators, certainly in hospitality, we're perfectly placed to fulfill that need. Why focus on experience over material goods? If you look at any psychological experiments, of which I look at several, and this is not just a sample of one, but there is a much stronger link to happiness for experiences, not least because they can be shared. If I go out and buy myself a Mulberry handbag, then I'm over the moon, I've got a Mulberry handbag, but I'm not sharing that experience with anybody, and it doesn't give me quite such a hormonal boost as an experience does. So we know that there's actually a psychological link as to why we should focus on experience rather than material goods. The quest for likes, unfortunately, we do live in a social media led world, and especially if you look at the younger generation, again, we've already said they're much more likely to focus on experience over material goods. Getting that all important like or heart or retweet or whatever it might be is really important to the younger generation. But it's also, the fact is it's psychologically, it's actually a validation of what we're doing anyway to ourselves. And actually, going out and buying a handbag is an instant gratification, and I'm going to carry that into meetings or take it out when I go out with my friends or whatever. But having that experience lasts a lifetime, and actually being able to share that with people online is incredibly important. And then the third point I wanted to make here was the point of FOMO, fear of missing out, for those of you who've been living under a rock. 2 in 3 millennials say that they suffer from FOMO on a regular basis. So the idea of, I've had an experience, I've shared it with, say, 3 or 4 friends at the time, I've then shared that online, 3 or 4 friends going, oh God, I wish I was there. Not something we can do at the moment, but certainly something that I think will come back and will be very, very important to capitalize on in a nice way. But also talking about experiential, it's not just hospitality. So we think experiential retail is set to explode, especially if you look at the situation we're in at the moment, whereby there's going to be an absolute glut of retail space. And if you're not putting your product in that retail space, then you need to be putting an experience in that retail place. Now, whether you team up as a retailer, this is if you were going to team up with an experiential provider, a competitive socializing provider, fantastic. But either way, we know that retail is moving more and more towards experience and slightly more away from product. I mean, this started, I don't know how any people watching who are London based who remember the old Topshop store on Oxford Circus. Now you go in and it's an experience. It really is. It's not a store anymore. And you've got a cafe in there, and you've got you've got a brow bar, a nail bar, and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it be lovely to go back to one of those places? But the fact is, we do believe that almost half of retail space in shops will be dedicated to experience rather than product in 2025, if we actually look at square footage that's been converted in the last 6 to 8 years. We know that the channels are blurring. So, retail, leisure, hospitality, it's all kind of becoming one. And a lot of that is to do with this experience economy. I think most of you will know these brands, Sweaty Betty, they do sportswear and athleisure wear. yoga classes in stores. Whole Foods do cooking classes and bands. They have live music on a Friday. I've been to a Waitrose gin tasting, which I'm aware of the fact makes me the most middle-class person in the world ever. Printer and Tailor, they are a great lifestyle brand. They sell sort of cool stuff for your house that none of us can afford, but looks really cool. But they do sewing classes and how to create things from, I don't know, a crate and your children or whatever it might be. This is all about experience rather than just going in and purchasing and buying stuff, which nobody really wants anymore. So moving on from that. Oh, Katy, the product's the most important thing. Yeah, it is, but only just. So if we look at that on-trade outlook program that we ran last year, 63% of people said the atmosphere has a significant impact on their choice of venue, and 70% say quality of food. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the most important thing is whether there's an experiential side to the visit, because obviously you've got to have good food, you've got to have good service, you've got to have, a good serve and a clean glass and good bar staff and knowledgeable wait staff and etc. But what we are seeing, and I used to run these projects like 12 years ago at another agency, a lesser agency, I might point out, and actually this particular idea of atmosphere has just grown and grown and grown in importance. So it's really, really, as we come out of lockdown, especially, like I love sitting in my garden in the sun with my husband and having a glass of wine, and I will be doing exactly that in about 4 hours time. But the atmosphere isn't quite the same as me sitting in a pub garden with all my friends or with colleagues after work. Those things are going to be very important. So when we come out of lockdown, we've got to be paying as much attention to the atmosphere of an outlet and of our venues as we have the quality of the products that we're serving. And here, just to illustrate that, really, we asked 1,000 pub and bar goers, why do you pay to have a drink in a pub or bar rather than drinking at home? And you can see right there, the number one reason is because it's a sociable environment. The number two is because it's atmosphere. So we may well, the product may well be the most important thing to us. Are we getting a good meal and good drinks? But it's not the reason we're drinking in a pub or bar rather than drinking at home. That's much more about, listen, look at number three. Who agrees with number three? Just to be able to get out of the house and go somewhere different. Oh, yes, that would be amazing. And being part of your local community. And then you can see there, number 5 down there, for an experience you can't get at home. So we've got to remember when we come out of this lockdown situation, providing that experience is so essential. Pairing with this, and I've put in a little bit about the low and no trend here, because I think it's really important that we understand that there's a very small, slim demographic that states that all they really want to do is go to the pub and get pissed. That's kind of not really in most people's leisure repertoire anymore. There are still a few people, and I'm not saying that a great community pub that does great beer has no place. It certainly does. But what we have to remember is that there are 329 million pub visit occasions per year that have no alcohol being consumed. So 1 in 4 pub visits are now alcohol free. And this is actually from our low and no report we released timely in January this year. So there's a real opportunity here, again, for experiential and for competitive socializing, because alcohol consumption is no longer the key, or I should say only driver in getting people through a venue's door. So we've got 24% of people claim that they consume no alcohol. I don't know any of those people. 39% of Gen Z say they consume no alcohol. So we need to remember that if we're not just providing somewhere that people can go and get boozed, then what are we providing? How do we create that atmosphere? How do we keep people? And then interestingly, because this research was done in December of last year and released in January of this year, 40% of people said that they're reducing their alcohol consumption in 2020. So again, how do we cater for those people? How do we get them to come through our doors? And I think that certainly competitive socializing and experiential and just experiences in general, I think, will play a massive part in that. We asked here, we asked these 1,000 people that we spoke to, why are we looking to drink less alcohol? And this is just some information for you, so you can see their general health reasons: save money, lose weight, etc. Whether we have these credentials or not within our drinks range, we need to complement them with that experience, with that idea of, I'm not just going to be sat there drinking a Diet Coke, staring at my mates who are all busy, you know, nicking back the beers after the football. You know, there's got to be more to it to get these people through our doors. I actually think that Brewdog have done a great job. I don't know if any of you've been to the world's first alcohol-free bar that launched in London at the beginning in January this year. But it seems like, I was thinking, oh, it must have been last year because it seems so long ago, but no, it was this year. You know, it's an alternative to their usual bars. It had an absolute, you know, it's a massive success in January, as you would expect for dry January, but it actually, I think it kind of blew them away, the level of success that it has. The invaluable thing here is that this concept, this design and how the delivery of this concept doesn't need a license. So because it doesn't need a license, it can be put anywhere. And I think that's something we also need to be thinking about, is how can different concepts, rather than your standard, you know, community pub with standard gastro pub, how can we start putting those concepts together with experiential to make sure that we've got a reason for people to come out and explore the hospitality industry, essentially. I always like this slide because I've got no idea how the hell Tiddlywinks got onto it. This is all to do with sports, so this won't include things like karaoke that we've been talking about previously, but this is all to do with sort of sports and entertainment. I think the point that I want to make here is that although experiential venues were becoming increasingly popular, I mean, the cinema was on its way back up, Tenpin Bowling was on its way back up. You know, last year, a third of all Britons was said to have gone bowling, which I think is a really, it's quite a surprising stat to me. Puzzles, bet that's right up the top right now. But anyway, what does this mean for experiential? I think that if you look at cinema is not going to come back as quickly. I don't think, as hospitality. I think when it does come back, you're still going to have social distancing, so you're going to have half full cinemas. So you need to bear that in mind. Tenpin Bowling, well, that's just a myriad of hygiene issues. So, you know, there's so many of these particular leisure activities that I think we've got to be careful as to how they're going to look when we come out of this corona situation. And I think that quite a few of these are going to need to be almost repurposed for the new world. All right, I'm going to play you a video now. We'll see if this plays. This was me in a place called Thieves Kitchen down in Worthing, and they had a disused, it was a function room, but they just never really used it, and it certainly wasn't making any money back. So I visited there last year, sort of September, I think it was. So I'm just going to play this video to you. Steve, give me a thumbs down if it doesn't play.
Pubs and sports have always been synonymous with each other, and we've seen a lot of articles in the trade press recently telling us that the next big thing is virtual reality and headsets and all of these sort of wacky ideas. But actually, when we speak to pub and bar customers, what they want is a little bit more traditional. We recently interviewed 1,000 pub and bar goers and asked them what they would like to see from their local pub, and 24% of them said that they would like to see a darts board. 21% of them said they'd like to see darts tournaments with other pubs. So we mustn't get too carried away by bringing in buckets and buckets of technology. I strongly believe that what pub and bar customers want is not newfangled technology that absolutely changes the way that they're going to visit pubs and bars. I think it's about using technology to make traditional games better. And certainly, Thieves Kitchen in Worthing does exactly that. You should definitely come along if you're in the area. Pubs and sports.
Oh God, no, it's just going to keep going. God, is there anything worse than seeing yourself on video in front of an audience? Yes, and don't go along because they are closed, but do go along when they reopen. And I think the point I want to make there, you know, again, as we're going through this presentation and knowing that it's Singa that have asked me to do this, I am a big believer in the fact that technology should add to an experience, and it should take away some of those pain points that perhaps might be experienced either by team members, by colleagues, or by people when they're in and out of pubs and bars. So I really do think that, you know, one of the great things about Thieves Kitchen is such a simple idea, and I don't know why this wasn't years and years ago, but they had tap and pay pool tables. So you didn't have to fumble around for the 50 pence or the pound and put it on the thing, and then it gets knocked off, and then you have an argument with somebody. And, you know, it just made everything a lot simpler, which I think was great. Right, so let's just move on. We asked those 1,000 pub and bar goers whether they'd attended a particular event in a pub or a bar in the last 3 months. And 1 in 4 said they had, but those second figures there are the percentage of people who said they'd like to. So you can see that we're possibly not hitting the target amount of event experiences in pubs and bars prior to lockdown, because we had, if you look at the 25 to 34 age group, 41% of them said that they wanted to have attended a particular event, but only 1 in 4 had. So there's definitely an opportunity for us to create more events within the hospitality industry. And the most popular events to attend there, so 51% said live music, 44% said quiz. I'm going to be honest with you, I think that quiz is going to go down a little bit when we come out of lockdown, because if I have to do another quiz, because that's what we're all doing, isn't it? And we're all doing it online. And actually, I think it's moved online quite successfully. And I've got a bit of a feeling that the local pub quiz night, you know, maybe there will be a few that are still online when we come out of this. So I think that might move down the ranks. Live sport on TV, I'm going to come on to that in a minute. Comedy, pub game tournaments, that's going to go down the ranking because you're going to have issues with hygiene and with social distancing. Film screenings, really unlikely. There's one that I think, maybe my next slide I'm going to show you, which is the Montpellier. This is in the Montpellier pub in Peckham, and I kept this slide in, even though this is from an old presentation prior to Armageddon. And I've kept this in because this is the kind of room that a lot of pubs have repurposed really successfully. And this is a great now background cinema, but I can't see that working post lockdown. So if we're an operator and we've got a room like that, what can we do with it where we can actually social distance, but still make use of the square footage that we've got? I spoke about sport just now. I think that this is going to be even more important. I think this might be an area where pubs and bars can win as well, is sports. If we're going to be seeing a lot of games being closed, if we're going to see a lot of games being played behind closed doors in the future, then this might be the only way to get that atmosphere that fans crave, because even if you're sat at a social distance, at least you are still in a pub with other people, just rather than watching an empty stadium. As you can see there, we asked people what makes watching sports on TV in a pub better than watching it at home. And again, you know, this all comes back to what social creatures we are. It's the atmosphere created by watching with a big group of people, the opportunity to chat with other fans, you know. So I think that sports might end up being a little bit of a winner, but any operators out there that are looking to improve the sort of sporting experience within pubs, you know, this is what the 1,000 people that we spoke to as part of On Trade Outlook said they wanted. So you've got to need more screens. You're going to need that anyway, because you're going to need people to space out. So you know, if you've got one big screen, that's not going to be good enough, because you're going to be halving, you know, or even quartering the amount of people that you can have on site at the same time. Table service is going to be a must. You're not going to be able to be 3 deep at a bar. That's just a fact. You know, you can work down every single one of those, but I won't because we don't have time. But to see how that experience can be improved. And I'm going to skip through this really quickly because I just wanted to talk briefly about the consumer of today and where that fits in with sort of experiential leisure and competitive socializing. This is just before lockdown, this particular research was collated. So 2 in 3 people were unhappy with their work-life balance. You know, there's been a steady rise in anxiety-related illnesses. Antidepressant prescriptions doubled in the last 10 years. Workplace stress was thought to be the health epidemic of the 21st century. Haha, no longer, my friend. 27% of consumers want products to make their lives easier. And this is where I really want to talk about using sort of technology when we're talking about experiential. What this translates to in our social lives is, I want something that's easy. I want to be able to go along to a pub or a bar and play a game or have an experience that is easy, that is convenient, and that is stress-free. And even more so, coming out of this horrendous situation, the anxiety that so many people are feeling and the stress that this has put people through, not least the operators of the hospitality venues that are closed at the moment, we've got to make sure that anything that we do create that's experiential, any competitive socializing solutions that are delivered, are foolproof, and they need to be those three things: easy, convenient, and stress-free. And then that leads us to the holy grail of effortless living, effortless socializing, and it's going to be just more and more important as we go through. I'm going to skip through this a little bit because I'm very conscious of time. But if you wanted to figure out, you know, what does my company do, whether I'm an operator, whether I'm a supplier, whatever I might be, how am I contributing to the effortless living that the consumer is going to need when we come out the other side of this situation? You know, are you tapping into their connected lifestyles? They are connected. If you've got an app where your product can be used easily and seamlessly online and within pubs and bars, and I think that you're onto a winner there. Is it frictionless? Make sure it's not something that's too complex, because you will have people that want to participate in competitive socializing and experiences within outlets and venues who aren't technological whizzes. Like myself, for example. Are you making their life simpler? So, you know, talking from a venue perspective, you know, are you making their social life simpler? Are you making them easier to connect with you? You know, are you making it convenient? Convenient is the phrase I've used at the end there. Interestingly, just before we went into lockdown, again, this is our on-trade outlet program. 57% of the operators, because we spoke to operators as well as consumers, told us that they think that the use of technology would improve the customer experience. And I can tell you right now that that figure is much higher for customers. You know, there is a little bit of a disconnect there. Customers constantly tell us that they think that hospitality is behind retail when it comes to technology improving customer experience. So again, that's something we can be looking at, and it's something we can be looking at now. You know, most of our venues are closed or they're doing takeaway only. We need to be sitting down and putting a checklist together of, okay, what technology will improve the customer experience, whether that is from a competitive socializing point of view, whether that's an operational point of view, whether that's a booking point of view, whatever that might be. We've got time to investigate that right now. But I said this earlier, and I said it in that horrendous video that we all just had to watch, that embracing technology should only be about an enhanced customer experience, because I've been challenged on this before where someone said, oh great, so robots are going to be doing our job. No, they're not. Robots are not taking over the world. We all know that's not the case. But how can we use technology to enhance our customer experience? Our customers are going to be coming back into our venues, and they are already going to be technologically advanced on where they were 6-8 weeks ago, because they've had to be. I had a great stat the other day. Before lockdown, around 7% of people had used a delivery app. That's now about 24% of people. So we need to remember that our customers are more used to using technology now, and they're going to be coming back into our venues, and they're going to be very happy to see technological advancements if it enhances their experience. And these are just a few stats from pre-lockdowns. 66% of people told us they'd pre-ordered food or drink. 43% said they had ordered via an app in a pub or restaurant. 42% had used an app to pay their bill. All of those figures are going to increase, because we're going to be ordering at our table, not going to be ordering at bars. So you'll be ordering via an app. You may well be pre-ordering because you will need to book your slot in a pub, bar or restaurant, so that we're staying physically distanced. And of course, paying by your mobile phone is going to become just the thing, because why not have one less touch point? It makes sense for everyone. So just remember, when we're coming out of all of this, any technological glitches that perhaps we all had personally before, hopefully some of those have been smoothed out. And I just put this in as a brief example, so I'll skip past it pretty quickly. But if any of you have been to any of the Disney parks, I haven't, this was shared with me by a friend, they've got an app where as you're walking past each venue, it tells you what their special is. You've got little secret things that you can order on there. You know, and I think that venues need to understand that their apps need to do more than just pay at the table, and actually can these apps be linking into experience, this sort of experiential customer involvement and engagement. Frictionless technology, as I said in the previous video, it's all about how can technology streamline the time-consuming processes and free up staff to focus on other things. And I think that's really, really important. Coming through this situation, we're going to have so many challenges operationally, whether that's checking on how many people are in the venue, whether that's, you know, the excess cleaning that we're going to have to do, that anything that is self-managed that comes into a venue for any reason and for any usage is going to be really valuable. So I'm just going to finish off on this. Top tips. So we need to create an immersive and shareable experience within each one of our pubs, bars, restaurants. And I know this doesn't always mean experiential and competitive socializing, but just the words immersive and shareable, you know, the organic photo opportunities that are going to come from this, because there are going to be a glut of consumers that don't want to come back into hospitality. And so actually we need to use the consumers that do to then bring those back in. You need to capitalize on that likes and that FOMO and everything else. We need to prioritize customer engagement, not sales. And any person that tells me they've got a sales target for the first 3 months of being open, I just don't want to have a chat with, because the bottom line is that we don't know how this is going to go. And actually we need to make sure that our colleagues and our customers are safe and that they're engaging back with our brands. It's not about how much can we sell them. We need to stimulate customer senses, because it's no longer, you know, as the title of this press, it's no longer good enough to have a quick pint. We need to defy customer expectations. If I think I'm going to go in somewhere and play a game, wouldn't it be great if that game can actually also link to my phone, or whether I can get my results on my phone the next day, you know, a bit like if you go into Junkyard Golf or any of those kind of places. Leverage in-venue events and services, change it up. We're going to have a lot of space that we don't know what to do with. We're going to have some awkward spaces, and ensure that the customer experience addresses consumer needs. So think about what we've said about safety and about customer engagement, and about the idea that convenience is going to be incredibly important. And then I'm just going to leave you with one last thought. 1,000 people that we spoke to, as I say, at the end of last year, told us that 1 in 4 of them told us that they believe that it is the pub or bar's responsibility to ensure that they have a memorable experience when they visit. And I can absolutely assure you that will only be increased when we reopen. And that's me. That is a whistle-stop tour. And I now know that it's 5 slides too long. Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
No worries. Look, thanks that you got through those slides in really good pace, but they are exceptional content now, and I think everyone will agree the insight is really amazing. I mean, of course, as you said, this is all changing. You know, these stats and numbers will change because we are in fairly turbulent times, but it's really nice also that it correlates really well with our first webinar about what Advocate Pubs and Amber Taverns were saying. You've really backed that up with the stats, because of course the first session was all about their opinions and assumptions. I noted a few bits, so sorry, I was writing lots of notes as you were presenting, and just aware of the time, so we got a good 5+ minutes to ask a few questions. But you mentioned this frictionless technology, and I think that's really key. Of course, where we sit as a SaaS-based business, we're all around technology, and that is ultimately our offering. It's an app. But at the same time, the point that you mentioned about making sure technology isn't complicating the experience, actually making sure that it's just taking away things like stress, you know, managing a queue. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be withdrawing from the experience. It's just adding a layer on top that means that, you know, we don't claim to change the voice of anybody, although sometimes you might think maybe that would be a good feature to have. But you know, things like managing a queue and taking away the stress of somebody who's running the bar, actually that's where technology adds value and doesn't just bombard people with on top of the experience itself. So I made a note on that, and I think that was really key. Of course, seeing tiddlywinks in there, there's something for everyone, I guess. And that whole 1 in 4 that is, you know, is either not drinking or seeking a kind of non-alcoholic experience. I mean, I'm drinking a bit less, but that's because I couldn't manage that much to begin with. But it's really clear. We see it a lot around us. And you mentioned about the high street. And if we look at the high street 5-10 years ago, there were already signs that they were moving to experience locations, experience centers. And we could always see, like, not just one flagship store in a certain radius, but actually 2 or 3 popping up. And I think obviously the last couple of months has meant that will speed up that change. But if we look at how retail has changed over the last 5-10 years, hospitality obviously will be going down that kind of route as well. And creating a destination to try and keep somebody not just for one drink, but for 10, 15 drinks. And that means keep having a range of entertainment options that keep them on site. So yeah. And you mentioned entertainment options that are going up and down. You mentioned like the quiz night might go down and others might go up. And I was thinking about that, and you're right. We've become, over the last couple of months, quite resilient and creative at finding things that we can fill a few gaps at home. And you're right. How many quizzes have we all been on Zoom calls? Loads. And there'll be that exact box trying to be ticked when we all go out. Like, what can I do at home, or what can't I do at home? And I think if anyone can answer that question, I think as a brand, we're also trying to develop our products so that we can further help venues tick that box. But I think that's key. If you can answer that, there's some gold at the end of that rainbow. But I think that's really great. There were a couple of questions that came in, and one was from our team. Let's ask one from a few others to begin with. But it's about that live experience, which you mentioned was quite high up in the priority order. They seem to be quite popular in driving that competitive socializing element. You know, any idea how hard those types of outsourced services might be to get hold of post-lockdown? Amber Taverns mentioned they needed to book these services almost 6 months in advance, even at the best of times. So is that something, when we come out, that you see your typical venue might struggle with, or is it just a requirement of a bit of pre-planning?
I think it's a bit of everything, really. I think, first of all, we're going to lose some venues. It's harsh to say that. I don't like saying it because I have such a love for this industry, but I think we are. I think that we had, like you say, there were a lot of venues that wanted the services that you're talking about. I think because we're going to have less venues, I'm not necessarily thinking it's going to be that hard to get hold of. I think we are going to have to pre-plan. Of course we're going to, because we're going to have all these hygiene things. We have to have all the physical distancing. I think that the hygiene situation is incredibly important, and the cleanliness and the safety aspects. I think that karaoke is pretty well placed for something like that, because your only hygiene issue really is your microphone, and especially if you've got the app, then everything else is being done for you and being managed for you. And obviously karaoke is it's a naturally physically distanced participation thing, especially if you're shit, of course. And in that case, it's incredibly physically distant.
You've heard me sing.
I've heard myself sing, but I really do. I really think that there are some of these competitive socializing areas that are going to be really positive for us, but it is about managing them. And I think also, if you are an operator and if you are a venue, I'd be incredibly careful about starting up something new that you've maybe never done before without having some kind of professional help, which is where I think that, suppliers like yourselves, and I do genuinely think that this is where people should be talking with guys like you, because you know exactly what you're doing, and hopefully you will have also done a lot of the sort of looking around and seeing where perhaps the issues might lie, and how you can solve those issues, and hopefully be there to advise venues and outlets that want to maybe start doing more of the experiential stuff that they haven't done before. Also, the other point is, sorry, and I think I made this slightly before, with pubs especially are quite often quite awkward spaces. Like, you do quite often get a lot of nooks and crannies and little back rooms and upstairs rooms and stuff. And with physical distancing in place, and also with having to have staff, keep an eye on certain areas in the pub and make sure that we've got the right amount of people in, and that people aren't getting too close, and there's no one coughing and spluttering in the corner, then actually there are some of these experiential ideas that can come in and maybe take over some of those awkward spaces, so that you're still making that square footage work for you, but also still adhering to physical distancing and everything else that we're going to need to do coming out of this.
Yeah, and that answers pretty much one of our more internal questions, which was around that 15% who saw karaoke as quite a popular form of entertainment. But yeah, I mean, having a solution that, whether it's karaoke or not, that can lean itself to being flexible to use that unused space, as you mentioned, a tool in the toolbox that you can use during the week, not just on a Friday or Saturday night, is quite key. So I'm glad that you you see some elements of our side that will grow. But
yeah, I think that any operator needs to sit down and, you know, good operators will have already done this, I'm certain, but what's your floor plan look like?
Yeah.
And then look at that through the day part and then through the week part. So, okay, so here I've got 5 different areas. Okay, what am I doing with them Monday to Wednesday during the day? What am I doing with them Monday to Wednesday in the evening? What am I doing? And you almost need to sort of plot it out and make sure that you get a good yield from every square foot that you've got. Most operators will have done that already, but that rule book's now out the window. So we need to look at that again now. And I think this is where you know, it doesn't matter how big your space is, you can fit some kind of experience into it if you're smart enough.
Yep, I've seen some of the smallest locations turn themselves into somewhere you more than happily spend hours. We're close to being at a time, but I really just want to ask one more question, and there's certainly 2 phrases that you brought up that I'll definitely be taking out of this, which is frictionless technology and effortless living. I'm definitely going to be using those in future presentations. Obviously, those 2 terms and the way you've explained them brilliantly, a lot of people will kind of say, this sounds great, you know, for many, but have you got any examples of how this has worked for both small and large operators, and any further advice you could give for anyone who likes the idea but doesn't know where to start?
Oh my God, what a question. I think with the idea of frictionless technology, what we need to understand is, what does our customer want? Because our customer doesn't want for Bob or Sarah behind the bar to not be serving us anymore. What they want is for Bob or Sarah to be able to spend that extra time making sure we've got the perfect serve, serving our drink perfectly, recommending a wine to go with our food because they're knowledgeable about that, whilst that technology is taking away some of the pain points for the customer consumer. And I've got some other research we've done before. We said there's 7 pain points when you go out to eat or drink as a consumer, and you know, one of the main ones is for example, paying the bill. It's not hard to put an app in place, whether you are a large or a small venue. There's so many solutions out there where you can pay at table. Now, that's a perfect example of frictionless technology, because that actually takes away one of my pain points. I don't have to wait for the card machine. I can just I can pay on an app. But it also, of course, is going to adhere to the new physical distancing rules and lowering the number of touch points we have whenever we go out to eat or drink. So that, as far as I'm concerned, is just the most basic bit of frictionless technology that we could introduce to any one of our venues at any time. And the other one was effortless living. So effortless living is just making it easy for me to understand. It's easy for me to go about my day-to-day life. Now, that could be something as simple as, I know one village pub near where I'm from, down in Surrey, the cheap seats, not the expensive ones, as you can tell from the accent, that actually over the Christmas period lays on a minibus that does 3 or 4 runs from the pub into the nearest 3 villages 3 times a night. That is effortless living. So effortless living doesn't even need to be tech advanced, although obviously it can be, because if I could order that taxi on a piece of tech, like you can order Deliveroo or Uber or whatever, then that would make it easy as well. But I think sometimes we take these buzzwords and we get a bit scared of them, and we're like, oh my God, that's tech. I hate the word tech. Do you know I hate the word digital? We should focus on digital. Oh, that's just ridiculous. That's just a big catch-all phrase. But you know, let's look at that. Let's look at how, you know, frictionless technology can actually lead to effortless living, and whether that is something that we do physically or that's something we use tech to do, perhaps it's a mixture of the 2. But I think if you can hit those 2 things coming through this lockdown period, and also take into consideration how you can use certainly frictionless technology to help you with physical distancing and safety procedures, then I think you're probably going to be onto a winner.
Fantastic. Look, thanks again, Katy. I mean, this was a really good 45 minutes. Once again, we just got through that time really quickly, but thank you once again. I'm also backed up by lots of thanks from emails popping in to say thank you also. So good to hear that 45 minutes of everyone's time has been well spent. But we are now at the end of this webinar. So again, thanks to Katy for her time, and everyone for freeing up their time to be part of this. We will make this content presentation available to everyone afterwards. And any questions you've got for us, of course, we can be contacted directly, and we'll be more than happy to field and answer those questions. But other than that, thanks once again. Wish everyone a really nice week ahead, long weekend at the end of it. And thanks again, everybody. Have a great day and goodbye.